Hello, this is James with Minor Illusion, and today I will be reviewing for you Call of Cthulhu, the 7th edition. This is an RPG I've always been interested in. When you talk about RPGs, generally you're told about Dungeons & Dragons, but the other big one that's been around for quite a while is Call of Cthulhu. The interesting thing between those two is how very different their focus is. In Dungeons & Dragons, you play as a powerful being who becomes even more powerful. In Call of Cthulhu, by comparison, you play as a normal human who becomes increasingly more unstable and less likely to carry on. The focus of the game is very much on investigation rather than high adventure, where you're presented with a problem, usually of a seemingly normal nature, which eventually proves to have some connection with the Cthulhu mythos of H.P. Lovecraft. Player characters in Call of Cthulhu are known as investigators, and their main job is to try and unravel some mystery and find the solution to it, but very often they are simply not up to the task. To have an entire party be killed in Call of Cthulhu is not an unusual thing. Now, this might seem slightly depressing, and if you took the game extremely seriously, it might be. But this is a game where you're playing as a normal person, and dangerous things like a falling tree branch or a bullet do almost real damage to you. And the main thing that your investigator has to contend with in Call of Cthulhu is going absolutely insane. Insanity is definitely a trope of the Cthulhu mythos. The Cthulhu mythos being the entire collection of H.P. Lovecraft's own writing and other writings that have to do with Cthulhu and the other elder creatures. An interesting thing about Call of Cthulhu, the game, is how satisfying it is to have your character be mauled to death by a Shoggoth, or ripped apart by a Deep One. Somehow that is more satisfying to me than playing as a D&D character. Now, the 7th edition of Call of Cthulhu is, in many ways, very similar to the 1st edition of Call of Cthulhu. Many of the rules are the same, many of the character stats are the same, but in 7th edition they've changed a few things. One new rule that they've introduced is called pushing a roll, where you try to do the same thing again, but if you fail this time round, the results are infinitely worse. Another new mechanic is spending luck. You have a pool of luck, then you can spend those points to try and improve your skill rolls, but once you run out of luck, then, well, you know what happens. The books themselves, the Keeper's Rulebook and the Investigator's Rulebook, are absolutely beautiful. By the way, you do not need to own both, though it is definitely recommended. The Keeper's Rulebook has absolutely everything you need in order to run the game. The Investigator's Rulebook features many more rules for investigators. It's basically a player's handbook. It would be useful to have one copy of each, one book to pass around, the Investigator's book to pass around to your group, and the Keeper's book for yourself. The book is filled with interesting monsters to fight, interesting adversaries, interesting situations. There's an entire chapter on how to resolve a chase scene, which happens more often than you think in a game of Call of Cthulhu. This is a game I found very, very enjoyable to run. The mindset of the players, the mindset of the game itself, definitely lends itself towards a one-shot, but I could definitely see this being played in a long-running campaign, though you may need to have several different characters as backup, as your main character goes absolutely insane or gets eaten by a Shoggoth. Call of Cthulhu 7th edition is a game I would definitely recommend to anyone interested in a dark sort of RPG, or in having a lot of fun with your friends while you get torn apart or go absolutely insane. This is James with Minor Illusion, and I would definitely recommend Call of Cthulhu 7th edition.